we go. So, I've been doing visuals and animation since before Premiere and before After Effects and well before real-time stuff. So, I've been around since it sort of kicked off back in the late 80s and 90s. And in the UK, we had acid house and techno starting. And I was in graphic design college back then. So I was interested in what was happening in typography and music. And I was seeing things that on TV that I wanted to know how to do them. And I was first inspired by EBN. Do you know EBN, Stas?
No?
Emergency Broadcast Network.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, right. If you don't know, and I'm pretty sure people on here do know who EBN is. EBN were video samplers, American video samplers from the late 80s and 90s. They did the best glitch, VHS, CRT, audio-visual music that ever existed. And they were the ones that basically inspired almost everybody. Cold Cut, anyone who was doing stuff, they inspired them. They were astounding. And I first seen them on television. I had to know how they did it. I had no idea how they did stuff. So if anyone's want to know, EBN, Emergency Broadcast Network. And they were my first big inspiration back in the day, early 90s. So I seen that and I wanted to know how to do that. But I was in Scotland, Glasgow, and there wasn't much around at the time. So we had to figure it out. So we had CRT TVs and VHS, and that's what we did. And then my friend stole a video mixer from the police. The police going past, but my friend stole a video mixer from the UK Railway Police. They broke into a police station in Glasgow, and they stole me the actual video splitter, like a matrix splitter, and it had a random button on it, so you could plug in composite signals, and you could press random, and it had a speed, and it would switch from thing to thing. So we had 7 VHS recorders and 23 televisions made into a Psychic TV cross from Psychic TV. And we would
one of my favorite bands.
Oh.
Wow.
So we would take that and we would take the 23 televisions into clubs, make a Psychic TV cross out of them. And it was chaos, different size televisions, different size monitors and screens. It was madness. And we would do virtual magical tarot. I made tarot cards, but I made them from cool graphic design, not psytrance stuff, not hippie stuff, but proper graphics. And then we would have them on random, and it would switch on random all over the screens in the clubs. And this was in Glasgow, 93, 94 or so. So that's how I started.
Tell me the story how you told me that it was your first VJ gig with 5 cars. This is exciting me completely.
So there was no projectors. There was no such thing as you couldn't get a projector. So it was all CRT TVs. And to do the gig, it would take 6 cars, 6 friends driving cars to take us to the club to set up the CRT TVs. And you couldn't do it any other way. And we would have to build structures to put the televisions on inside the club. And the heat of the televisions was incredible in the club as well, in the techno clubs. And I did this in a place called Paisley in Scotland, in Club 69. I did it in Glasgow as well. So this was around 93, 94. And at that time, I'd just finished graphic design college. So I was into typography and really cool type. And there was a design company in the UK called Tomato. And Tomato, they did the visuals for Underworld. If you ever seen any of Underworld's early visuals or the record covers from the early 1990s, it was beautiful typography. And I was inspired by them and the Designers Republic. And the Designers Republic did all the visuals and all the type for bands like Pop Elite itself. And they then did stuff for Warp Records. So that was my original inspiration, was EBN, Emergency Broadcast Network, Tomato, who was a UK design company, and the Designers Republic. And that was another UK design company that did super cool, really Japanese looking stuff and futuristic typography. So I was very lucky. I started this just at the beginning, just after Acid House, and just as computers were just coming in. So my first computer was a Quadra 660 AV, and that had a composite in, so I could take in a VHS cameras and use the VHS cameras, and I would record my graphics from a screen and print it out, and then take them in via the VHS camera into the computer using, I think the only codec we could use at the time was maybe Cinepack, and that was the only codec that existed. And there was a bit of MIDI software as well called VUJAK, VUJAK, and that was made by one of the guys from EBN. That was Brian Kane, who's another hero of mine. He made this software, and it was the first MIDI video software, and it allowed you to put videos on your keyboard and play them. And that was early 90s, and that was astounding. You could press a key and video would play. Admittedly, the video would be 240 by 180 pixels, but it still played, and it was still video, and you could still fucking do it. So that was the first kind of VJ sampler back in the day. It was VUJAK, VUJAK, and that was Brian Kane who made that from EBN.
Cool. You ever heard about Video Toaster?
Oh, hell yeah, of course, yeah. Video toaster, that was Amigas. So I didn't have an Amiga. I lucked out. Another classic story, Scott story here, was that I stole £5,000 from Prince Charles. King Charles, if you're watching, you're not getting your money back. So I applied for a grant from Prince Charles, who had a thing called the Prince Charles Trust, and I applied for £5,000 to start up a T-shirt company. And I got the £5,000 and didn't start the T-shirt company. I bought a Quadra 660 AV Macintosh and a scanner and a printer, and that cost me £5,000 for a computer that was black and white, a scanner which was black and white, and a printer which was black and white. And the entire total cost was £5,000. And I stole that money from Prince Charles and never paid him back ever. He's now the king, so you know.
It was a nice setup to make like Berlin reality printed.
Yes, yeah.
Everyone likes black and white here.
Yeah.
Until you are on a CSD day like this weekend.
So I got money off of Prince Charles to start doing things, and that's when I set up Amoeba. And that was around 1994. And that was me. And I worked for design companies and animation companies and TV companies. But back in the day, there was no animation companies. This was in the mid-90s. So it was just design schools and design places. And motion graphics hadn't really happened then. For people like you and me, motion graphics was still things that was on Sun workstations and things like that. And TV companies that had Quadra and Quantel things. People like you and me didn't have the access to graphics cards. We didn't have the access to anything like that. And then Adobe Premiere came along, and After Effects came along, and that just changed the game for everybody. We all could do the same things that TV companies could do.
What time it was? Which year?
About 1994, 95. So we got access to Avid, After Effects, Premiere. These sorts of bits of software started coming out. And there was no internet, so you couldn't just download it. So I was working in design companies, so I would steal the software from the design companies, and I would steal the software, load it onto my computer, and you could do that because the computers weren't going online to check each other. That didn't happen. So you could install the same software on a million different computers with the same serial number, and no one checked it. So I would steal the software and then give it to all my friends to install the software so we could use that. And again, there was no laptops or anything. I was using a Quadra 660 AV. I had friends who used video toasters, who used it for the Amiga, but I said I was a Mac guy at the time, and I was an early Mac adopter, so I was around then.
What time is Amoeba actually born?
Amoeba was born around 94, about 1994. So that's when I first officially started calling myself Amoeba and doing things as Amoeba in 94. And that's when I was working with Rubber Dub Records in Paisley, who had a connection to Detroit and the underground resistance and people like that. So from the very beginning, I was tuned in and I was clued in with some of the coolest cats that ever existed. So all the Detroit guys would come to where I lived, and Detroit guys would come from Detroit to Paisley in Scotland to play, and they loved it. They thought it was amazing.
Cool, man. Even didn't you had a relation to Detroit somehow?
Oh yeah, if you can see, I've got an underground resistance tattoo. So I've got a UR tattoo. Yeah, Paisley in Scotland is basically the Detroit of Scotland. It's where they make the cars. It's industrial. It's poor. It's working class. There's a lot of crime, and that's Detroit. It's the same place. And when the Detroit guys came across, this is the same as Detroit. And my friends who ran the record label took Underground Resistance to go fishing for the Loch Ness Monster. And that was the highlight of the Detroit guys' lives. They couldn't believe it. They were in a little boat fishing for the Loch Ness Monster. And that was it. It blew their heads off completely. And they absolutely loved Scotland. And from that moment, Detroit and Scotland's had a connection since way back in the day. Like Berlin. The Berlin connection, Detroit, Scotland had the exact same connection at the exact same time.
Okay, wow. Maybe we need to make someday tele show about Detroit, Scotland, and Berlin connection.
Oh hell yeah! The connection was always there from the very beginning. We couldn't go to Berlin; we didn't have the money to fly there. But Richie Houghton and Basic Channel people and all the Detroit cats would come over to Scotland, and all the Berlin people would come to Scotland. And we had Soma Records in Scotland, and that was Slam. So we had couple of really good record labels and really good techno labels in Scotland, and with lots of credible techno. So I was very lucky. I came up with the coolest cats you can imagine just at the very start of it, and the very start of computers and typography and drugs and techno and clubs and youth culture. And I was involved in all of that in the early 90s in Scotland. And I then moved to London in 1996. I moved to London. And again, I lucked out. I ended up working at Mac User magazine, the Macintosh magazine. And I ended up working for techno magazines as well as a designer. And they would get me in to redesign things in a cool youth culture way, because I was at the forefront of what was happening at the time. So I was at the forefront of typography and the new scene of VJing and things like that was just starting, and the new scene of motion graphics, which again was just starting. There was Infinity was the sort of first big 3D software that you could get for a Macintosh. So
I remember this.
Yeah, Infinity, and there was one before that called Logo Motion, which is 3D stuff as well, and I would use that. So I was working at Mac User magazine, and I was experimenting with crazy typography and crazy animation. The same stuff I do today, I was experimenting 30 years ago and showing the people at the magazines that this is what's coming. This is the world you're about to see. And they couldn't believe it. Back in the day, people didn't allow you to use more than one font at a time on a magazine. You couldn't put 2 or 3 fonts on the front cover. And a record cover, you couldn't do that, because or animations, because it confused people. They'd be confused. There's too many words. No, there's too many things happening. And I kept explaining to them, you have no idea what's about to happen. Your world is going to be turned upside down. And it was. MTV, Acid House, techno, everything else, that gaming, all of that combined in the early 90s with techno. And it just changed the way where we are now. And then the internet came along.
Okay, wow. Actually, yeah, I can also tell you the story how, we know each other since a while, but last year I start mentioning your post with this crazy Brutalist project.
Oh yeah.
Maybe you can also show some of them for
it's
the
on
people.
Right now.
Yeah,
it's
and
on the stream right
can
now.
you tell how you started to do these crazy things with AI and stuff, which is like super fancy now?
Okay, well, oh Christ. The Brutalist stuff started because I was working with the Black Dog. So the Black Dog are a legendary UK electronic band here. They were all rock records. They've been around since I've been around. They were around back in the late 80s and 90s. And the 2 guys in the Black Dog are hardcore. And they were in many bands in the 1980s as well. Proper bands, punk bands. So they're real musicians. And they're also photographers. And they've got an interest in brutalism. And Russia is brutalist. Berlin has brutalism. Glasgow has brutalism. I grew up with that. So maybe 5 years ago or so, when the first AI stuff started and GANs just started, I got an interest in it and thought, well, okay, how do we do this? So I took a whole bunch of one of the guys from the Black Dog. I took his stuff in to AI software and AI things. And I have a friend here in the UK called Shardcore, who's a Python guy. He's proper. He's the real deal, 100% the real deal. And he's a Satanist AI guy. He's the real deal. And he's into magic the same as I was into. So he started helping me do stuff with AI maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago. He was experimenting with GANs way back then. He'd been around it for ages and ages. So he showed me how to start with this. And I then started using AI services and software to create the Brutal Font Estates, which is basically brutalist estates made of typography and fonts. And that's my interest, is typography and fonts and animation. So I combined them all, and I combined them all for doing live sets with the Black Dog. So I have 3 or 4 different live sets I do with the Black Dog, and we do audio visual stuff together. And when we do live, I've got stuff I use from Martin from the band. I made sort of Laura's before a Laura came around. I made Laura's before Laura's were coming around from his work. And then I've got stuff with the typography stuff, and I've got even more newer stuff, which is the typography stuff, plus volumetric animation and all sorts of, and camera tracking as well at the same time. So for me, AI was always just another tool. I like using tools and software and combining things and doing stuff. I've always did that since the 90s. And I still use CRT stuff. I still use VHS cameras. I still use high 8 cameras. I've got a whole bunch of VHS and VHS-C cameras and the very first ever camcorders. I've got maybe 20 of them here. I still use them, and I still do stuff like that. So for me, AI was always a tool, and it's still just a tool. It's just another thing. It's another tool in your box. It's another bit of software. There'll be 100 more in the next 10 years, and I keep using them and doing stuff. But the difference is the art direction of it and the style of it is making it look as good as possible, and not just making it into visual soup. And that was one of my strong points. In the 90s, the stuff I would do back in the early 90s always looked really cool and really sharp and really deliberate. And that was my strength, was making it look good. And that's where I became the visual police, whereby at gigs with other VJs, I would stop them. If they were doing psytrance shit or stupid swirly visual soup, I would strong arm them. I would fling them off the VJ decks, off. Visual police, not having that shit, not having that. And I maintained a tight ship. My friend and our Russian friend together, Vadim Epstein, he's the same. He's exactly the very first time I met him. He's the visual police as well. He was very good at going nyet, and telling people.
Can you tell the story about the Kazantip and all this crazy community with Vadim and?
Way back in 2005, there was a VJ community called VJ Forums, which is an online forum. It's where all the VJs went online, and it was a place of chaos and madness and death threats. It was basically 4chan for VJs. It was insane, and I would post stuff up there. You get into arguments all the time. And one of the guys who liked what I did was a Russian guy called Vadim Epstein. And they had a festival in Moscow called Abracadabra.
I remember this name, yeah.
Yeah, and him and Dmitry Garin, who ran Hyperboloid Records.
I know him as well. Yeah.
Dmitry Garin and Vadim Epstein invited me over to Moscow, and they invited me to play. And when I heard that, the first thing I said was, okay, can I come over and stay for 2 weeks? Because fuck's sake, Moscow. Scottish guy going to Moscow, I am so fucking there. Get me over there. So I went over and I performed that for 3 days, I think, at the Abracadabra Festival. And I met Vadim, I met Anton, I met Dmitry Garin, I met a whole bunch of people in Moscow, and I ended up staying for 15 days or something like that. People put me up in the houses. I just stayed there. I had an amazing time, and from that moment on, I had a connection with Russian VJs and Russian video artists, and at the time, the sort of the burgeoning real-time thing, real-time stuff. I hadn't seen it in the UK, but for some reason, the Russian guys were telling me about real-time software and this new world coming over of real-time stuff. And when I arrived, they were using VJO. Did you ever see that software?
No.
VJO was one of the first open source video VJ softwares. So they were using that, and that was kind of real-time. and it was really good. It's excellent. You could had free frame effects and all sorts of real time effects. And in the UK, I think we only had Archaeos.
I remember this. Yeah, I had it.
Yeah, Archaeos, and I think Resolume was just starting, and VGO was just like rushing chaos and mayhem. So I got introduced to that, and then from that moment on, Vadim Epstein, who was the what was his title? The Grand Minister of Visual Disinformation at Kazantip. I think that was his title. So he'd been doing visuals at Kazantip for a while, and he invited me over to do stuff at Kazantip around 2007, 2008. And from there, at Kazantip every year, there would be maybe 5 or 6 VJs invited over from all over the world to stay for like 21 days at Kazantip and just go fucking mental and do anything you wanted to do and work on big screens and projection mapping things and all sorts of stuff. And it was there that I first got introduced to things like VVVV by Vadim and things like that, and introduced to all sorts of crazy Russian laser people and all sorts of mad things and crazy Ukrainian artists and all sorts of people. And for a few years, I would be one of the official artists in residence at the Kazantip Festival. And I met many, many amazing visual artists from Germany, America, Australia, France, everywhere. Not many UK people. The UK people weren't, the English people weren't really that good at being normal with Russians. They were too busy. They were too busy being scared most of the time and being introverted. Whereas I was fucking woo! I was having a great time. I would have the best time ever. They'd be having to drag me away from the place. I absolutely loved it. Whereas I have a friend, CFAX Acid Crew, Andy Jenkins. He's Square Pusher's brother. And I remember in Moscow, Andy couldn't even get into his own gig. The security guards were niet, and they wouldn't let him into his own gig. And I had to show Andy, push them out the fucking way. Out the fucking way, move. And I showed him how to push the Russian guard. Out the fucking way, move. This is my gig. And I had to show him how to behave in Moscow at the time, because most of the English people there were very reserved and were a bit scared of the Russians. Whereas I'm Scottish and it was just the same people as me, fucking idiots. So it was absolutely no problem. And that happened in Kazantip as well. So there was a lot of really good artists, but most of them were European. Most of them. Never met any other Scottish people there. Never met any other. The only English people I would meet there would maybe the artists who were playing. So maybe the DJs who were playing, but not that many. A couple of video artists would come out, but they were very timid and very quiet. Whereas I was full blown, wow, top off, here we go, wow, 21 days of madness.
So how you then started to work with MTV?
Oh, Christ.
After all these crazy underground stories.
Oh, yeah. I've always had one foot in the underground and one foot in the corporate world. It's always been that way. I've always did that. So even the VHS days. So because you're a VJ and you're a video guy, you experiment. You do crazy things. You do mad things with typography. You do mad things with video, with animation, with frame rates, with software. And a company who used to work for MTV seen me and said, whoa, we've got some stuff here. Would you be interested in doing some title sequences? And at the time, I was experimenting with a lot of typography and animated typography. I thought, yeah, why not? We'll give it a go. So I'm just going to shove on the screen just now. You'll see some things popping on which are MTV related. See if they'll go. There we go. So at the time, you'll see them playing. And that was, I was bringing in the stuff I would do in the VJ world, multi-layered stuff in After Effects, multi-real-time stuff, cut-out stuff I was experimenting with. And a company who did a lot of work for MTV seen me, introduced me to MTV, and then they just asked me, they would have interesting things to do. And they would go, Scott, here's $5,000. Can you do a 30-second animation that is blah, 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 blah? And that was it. And then I had a relationship with them for maybe 10 years or so, where I'd be doing the crazy experimental typography, experimental idents, title sequences, all sorts of strange stuff. But most of that came from the VJ world. That would come from where I was experimenting with, doing things. So in the VJ world, there was no rules. And TV, there's lots of rules. And I broke them all in TV. So there's a thing called the Harding test. And that's where you have too many frames and glitch frames and strobing. So every animation you do for television has to go through the Harding machine. And every single thing I did would break it because I was doing stuff that was so fast and do all this kind of stuff. And I figured out a way of beating the Harding machine. I could beat it because it was doing full frame. It would measure full frames. And if your frame moved, the whole frame moved in 3 frames, it was illegal. And they would ban the video. So what I would do is I would put cool little cyber borders around the video. And the borders wouldn't change. But the inside with the video, that would move around and go crazy. But because the whole frame wasn't moving, it would get past the Harding machine. And I broke the rules for the Harding machine. And the guy who does the Aphex Twins videos, Nicky, I can't remember his second name. He does all the crazy Aphex Twin videos now. You know his work. You've seen his work over the last couple of years. I helped him get a whole bunch of stuff through television by showing him the tricks of not making your video full screen, by putting a tiny little border around your video that doesn't change. But the video can go fucking crazy as long as there's at least 10 pixels around the edges that don't move. You're fine. So
you hacked this machine, yeah?
Yeah. So I hacked the Harding machine, and to this day, the Harding machine still exists. It's still there, and it's still things have to get through that. And every now and again, a TV company will phone me up and ask me, "How do we get this video through?" And they'll send me the video, and I'll do the same trick I did 20 years ago, and it still works to this day. So if anyone's listening to this and they have to get a video past it, that's how you do it. That's a trick for it.
I think, yeah, television is one of most conservative things on the planet. I was doing, I think it was around 15 years ago, I was doing the infographic system for Russian commercial television. And they were looking for different platforms to make television professionally. Yeah, it was like some Israeli company doing this super expensive servers and stuff. And it was looking completely like 3D Max in the first version.
Yeah.
Something like that, with virtual rooms. How is your experience about VR, XR stuff? I see you doing a lot of this.
Well, VR and XR stuff. I've been around, I think I started doing VR stuff around 2015, when the first Oculus came out. So I got the first Oculus, and then I also, the very first HTC Vive. There was a guy from Vive, I met a guy, and he sent me 2 of them. He sent me 2 Vives from Vive for nothing. It's like fucking amazing. And so I had a Vive and I had the Oculus. So I made my first VR experience around 2016. And that was an interactive theatre VR piece, which was one-on-one. People put the headset on and things would be placed into their hands and all sorts of interesting things would happen. And from then onwards, I started developing with other developers interesting stuff. I had the Illuminatus trilogy. I had the rights to the book by Robert Anton Wilson called the Illuminatus trilogy. So I turned that into a VR experience. I did a whole bunch of AR stuff with that as well. And I did a whole bunch of interesting 360 VR stuff as well at the same time. And it was, again, the same thing. It was a new technology that came out, like VJing, new thing that was happening, and it was easy enough to translate stuff that I was doing, and I was doing 3D as well at the same time, but I was always making the VR stuff look as cool as possible. Like I said, that's my main thing, is to be the visual police. If it looks shit, no fucking chance. I'm not having that. So I've always tried to make things look as cool as possible, and the Illuminatus trilogy one that I did, that was a cool VR experience. So that was VR that was involved in that. There was magic and Crowleyan magic involved in that. Alan Moore, the comic writer, was involved. He played a computer called Fuck Up inside it. There's a interactive LSD scene where you take acid inside the VR experience. There's sigil magic. You have to take the acid and do magic inside VR.
Do you need actually HTC Vive after?
Yeah. So you have to do acid and do sigil magic inside the VR experience and draw sigils and all sorts of stuff. So I was incorporating what I was into the VR. And I've always did that. The things I like, I've always brought into the work that I do. And always tried to keep the aesthetic as cool and as original as possible. Because that's what people notice. If people see what you're doing, they see it's interesting and it looks good, and it's not visual soup, then they like you. When it's visual soup and everything turned to 11 and everything on screen at the same time, it's terrible, absolutely terrible. But when it's done properly, then it's slightly different. I can see I've got some drop frames coming through in this, but I think that's just probably to do with with my setup here just now.
Okay, no problem. We will anyway later cut what you're recording locally on your machine.
And then put it on. Okay, yeah, it should be fine. No problem.
So I hope on the end everyone who will be interesting for a look the stream will have the qualitative version of it.
Okay, right. And the XR stuff, the VR stuff, that's been almost 9 years been involved in that, been around that just now. But like everywhere else, all that world's ending just now in the UK. That's moving on now to other things in the UK. The VR thing is still here, but there's not so much interest in the VR stuff now, which is unfortunate in the UK. It's still, in Europe, it's still big, but in the UK, the VR stuff is, people aren't funding it as much as they used to do. So I used to get funding for VR stuff to do them. Now, not so much. It's all changed into all sorts of other stuff just now. So again, like every 5 or 6, 7, 8 years, you have to evolve. You have to move. You have to go into something else. And you have to do other things. And all the way through this world, I've been teaching. So that's been another thing I do.
That is also interesting topic, because once since both of us having like around 25 years of experience in the industry and underground, let's say, and we can realize that cycles of like long distances, like 7 years, 12 years, that everything is changing, and in order to be still actual, you have to learn a lot.
Constant, and never change. You have to always learn. There's no such thing as knowing things. You must not lust after results. You must enjoy the process. It's always a process. Everything's a process. It never ends. Learning never ends. Magic never ends. It never ends. It's continual. You have to keep going. You have to keep doing it. Otherwise, you don't exist anymore.
So, from the point of potential audience looking to us now or will looking to the stream later, I can imagine some people can ask how to be successful as an artist in that field. And I think you have something to tell about that. And also, yeah, we have a provocative topic in our streaming plan called "Design is not a democracy."
Yeah.
So I will ask you to explain this for the people.
Yeah, no problem. Design is not a democracy. You need a vision. And when it comes to design and design companies and animation companies and TV companies, they have art directors and a creative director. They have lots of people who do the work, but there's usually one single point at the end of that process of a vision. And design can't be a democracy. It's a totalitarian state, design. You make a choice, you make the vision of what you want, and you stick to that. You can have changes, and you can incorporate those changes, no problem. But you cannot have multiple people making design choices. That's how you end up with websites that look shit. That's how you end up with jobs that look terrible, because there's a committee involved in it. And too many cooks spoil the broth. When you have too many cooks on a project, all giving their opinions on it, the vision goes. There is no more vision. And that's the magic gone. The magic is left. When you have the vision, that's your magic. That's the magic right there. As I said, you can incorporate changes. You can incorporate other voices, but you're incorporating them into your vision. And that's why you have art directors. That's why you have creative directors. And I've been around that world since the 90s of working with creative directors and art directors and design companies and design agencies. So I've seen the structure, and I've seen how that works. And I've seen how people can get their ideas across without insulting people, without upsetting people, and showing them how to be trusted with the vision of what they're looking for. And that's what most art directors are. They're there to give the confidence to the client of what you can do and what your vision is. And if you have the experience and you know how to do that, then it's easy to translate your vision into a thing that other people can see. And when other people see your vision, you don't have any issues. The job goes smooth and everything works. It's when other people can't see your vision and they can't visualize what you're trying to do. And there are tricks and there are ways in they're able to do that. And that's what when I work with corporate clients, or I work with design agencies or TV companies, there is a system there that you can play and use in order to get the client to trust you and to leave you alone with the vision. And they can come in and they can give you advice and they can swap around. But when they trust you, they don't start giving you a million opinions a day. They don't do that because they trust what you're going to do is exactly what they've seen from you. And the way I've been doing it, the way that designers do that and art directors do that, is by a process in the job, by mood boards and pitch decks and showing visuals to the client that they fully understand and fully see and they can visualize in their heads. Because unlike designers and visual artists and video guys, clients find it hard to visualize things, most of them. And that's why they come to people like you and me, because they know that we can do that. And then the way to do that is you solidify an idea or a process. And there are many ways, but you do a pitch video, you do a pitch deck, you do a mood board, you do a style deck. There's a whole bunch of ways of solidifying your idea that the client can then look at it and go, oh, right, I get it. Oh, right, excellent, brilliant. Oh, I fully understand it. And from that moment on, the client leaves you alone. And they only come in to help and they only come in for specific bits. When they can't see it, that's when they get other people's opinions and they start asking other people's opinions. And that's where it goes wrong. That's where everything just falls in on itself and collapses. And you're doing changes to a job for months on end and end and end. And then they don't like the job and things go wrong in the job, all that kind of stuff. So it's having the confidence and showing the client what your idea and the solidification of that idea. It's magic. It's always been magic. It's sigil magic again, all these things. You're condensing all the ideas into one thing. And that one thing you're showing to the client or the audience or something like that. And they can see it, they can understand it. And if you understand magic and the magical process, then it's an easy thing to do.
Cool, man. Do I understand correctly that behind of effective communication with clients, there is a technology how you can evolve your confidence and artistic vision?
Absolutely. Of course, there's a process to it. There's a system of magic to it. Yes, there is.
So basically, I think it's the right point to kind of announce that we have because we do the online school, and basically it was looking the recent years more or less like touch designer school, but it's not our target. So we want to help artists to be successful in different ways. And since we started to communicate with Scott since months already, we slowly evolving the concept of a course which can provide some technology to be effective as an artist. So in current moment, we can slowly start introducing the program of a course. Can you tell your vision about that? And I will add my commentaries on them.
Well, basically, it's the integration of the skills of being like a designer, an art director, and a creative director with the skills of being a touch designer artist or a visual artist or an audio visual artist. It's a combination. I was lucky. I was a designer, art director first, and then I became a visual artist and an audio visual artist after that. Whereas lots of people are visual artists and video artists and don't have the sort of schooling of the background of the creative industries and working within the creative industries, and they don't have the tool set there to enable them to sort of work properly. They have the skill set to do the jobs. They have the artistic skill set to do the creative work, but the process of being able to get the confidence in what they do, the confidence in the client accepting what they do, and the confidence in their own work, they don't really have that because they've been video artists first, and then they've had to work with clients. Whereas I had to work with clients first, and then I became a video artist. I was always a designer from the early 1990s. So I was always around the corporate world and always around that world. So I learned how to deal with these people, and I learned the tools and the tricks of the trade. And the tricks of the trade are simple. Everything has tricks. And the tools of this trade is basically to gain your confidence in what you do and how you approach what you do and how you approach the clients. And this will help artists who use any type of audiovisual software. But because you guys specialize in touch designer and touch designer stuff, it makes sense to do something with that. And I've been around touch designer and VVVV and all sorts of stuff for a long, long time. I'm not a touch designer expert at all, but you guys are usually the experts in this, and you know how to translate things that I do in After Effects, things that I do in Blender, things that I do in Unity. You can translate them into real-time stuff within touch designer and help people with the skills and the skill set that I have into touch designer.
So basically, yeah, like we're planning a course. For now, it looks like 7 sessions, and it will be mixed experience, let's say, because most point or strong point of this course to develop a confidence of developing and presenting the idea, but in order to make this also not to make this also quite applicable for the practical work, it's separated to several parts. Yeah, so one part is about it's a 4 sessions which will Scott present about how to develop the idea, how to make the mood boards. He make explanation more detailed, and then we add 3 sessions about how to realize some of traditional motion design techniques using touch designer in real time, which can be good replacement for After Effects in sense of making everything real time.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we even add some short Houdini parts to make nice effects like broken logos and broken text and stuff. What is like was also visible in the some videos.
Any of the things you see that I do, I've spent years in After Effects, and I have a phrase, no surrender to the render. And I've been around that forever and ever and ever. And I now do real-time stuff, so I do lots of real-time stuff in Unity and all sorts of software. But Touch Designer is the obvious choice. So being able to integrate the styles, the looks, the animations, the graphics, the motion graphics, the glitch effects, the breakup effects, having templates and things to do that in Touch Designer makes so much sense now, rather than rendering in After Effects. I've spent almost 27 years rendering in After Effects, and as much as I love it, I hate it. And I want to move on to Touch Designer. I want to move on, and I want to take what I do in After Effects and take it through into Touch Designer. And I want a whole bunch of templates. I want a whole bunch of things, and the things that I can do in other software, I want them real time. I want them there. I want the tools ready for us, rather than rendering. And rendering serves a purpose. It's really good, and it can do. You need to have the skills for it and the patience, but also real time. Being able to do real-time glitch graphics, real-time motion graphics, typography, wipe-ons, all the sorts of stuff that I've did for TV for years and years and years, having that as a real-time tool set, that's invaluable. It's absolutely invaluable. And being able to sort of combine what I do with what Stas does using Touch Designer, it's a golden opportunity right there. I know I'm good at what I do, and I know you're very good at what you do, so why don't we combine it together and show people how to do this and take them up to another level that will give them the confidence in their work and the way to do things to be able to show people.
So basically, current idea of us looks like it will be a briefing on the start, so that you kind of getting the client who wants to make a video branding.
Yep.
And then we do these 7 lessons to make you go through the whole way from start thinking about the idea, develop the mood boards, maybe use some AI tools to
using AI tools to make the mood boards.
Visualize that, and then finally on the end of the course you will need to make a resulting video,
absolutely, and a combination of the old school ways that I grew up with and doing, and the new school ways of real time, and combining them both into a new way of doing things, and you're giving people the skill set that they probably didn't have and they didn't know about, and being able to combine them properly.
Yeah, that's from my point of view super practical thing. I'm also really happy to start moving a bit from the poor nerdy course on something which is more related to the practical application, and for that I think the understanding and be sure in your conceptual vision and aesthetics is super important.
For me, that's key. The aesthetic of everything's always been key. And once you nail that down and you have that aesthetic, and then you show the client, you show them your aesthetic, they have the confidence in you. They know instantly, oh, right, he knows what he's doing. He knows how it's going to look. He knows the colours. Look at the influences we've got here just now. Look at how it's going to be. This is how it starts. This is the middle of it. This is the end of it. This is the fonts we're going to be using. These are the styles. This is the animation we're going to be using. It. Yeah, I can see that. Done. And that when you have that and you can show that to the client, perfect.
Maybe you can showcase some of your favorite projects and tell some stories about that for the last part of
for the
our
last part.
talk.
Let me see. Let me see what I've got just now. Oh yeah, I'll shove that up. So I'm just going to shove up. You'll see a thing popping up. I've did many different styles of things. I have so many different styles. Graphic styles, typography styles, animated styles. One of the things that I was good at was doing the record sleeve for a band, and then turning that record sleeve into the music video and animating the whole thing and integrating the record sleeve, the music video, and the live visuals all together and doing that. And I've worked with worked with Compost Records in Germany.
I know them, yeah. I know the Michael.
Okay, yeah. Right, so I worked for Compost on a band that they had called Product 01. The stuff's on the screen just now. And I did record sleeves for them. I did music videos for them. And I did live visuals for them. And I managed to integrate everything together. So what I would do is I would design the record sleeve, multi-layered Photoshop work, really cool, really a brand new style at the time. So I would do a neo-psychedelic pop art, hand-drawn, messy, grunge, everything together. And then I would get that cleared. They go, yeah, that's the album cover. I would then animate that album cover into a full music video using the animation from it. Again, they would love that shit. And then when the band went on tour, I would turn those graphics into the live visuals for doing a tour with them. And that way, it's the record label would get a cohesive look from the record sleeve to the music videos to the live visuals. And nowadays, that's kind of normal, right? But 20 years ago, it wasn't like that. No one was doing that. So I kind of specialised in giving a record label or an artist or a recording artist something interesting to do, something really, really cool, whereby they would get the sleeve, the video would match, the live visual would match, it'd be a whole cohesive look, and people would, as soon as people seen any of it, they know that's the band, that's Product 01 or whatever they were called. Oh, I've seen them before, oh, I've seen that record sleeve. So I was very good at helping record sleeves getting meme attention. So this was visual memes at the time. So people would remember the colours and the look of something, and they would instantly go, oh, I've seen that video, or I've seen that, and I've seen that. So that was one of my skills back in the day. So I worked for a whole bunch of record labels doing that. And that was really interesting and really cool. The other things was I did a whole bunch of stuff for the author Robert Anton Wilson. He's the guy who wrote the Illuminatus trilogy, Cosmic Trigger, and a whole bunch of psychedelic magical books in the 60s and 70s. And I did a whole bunch of plays. I did 3 separate plays where I did the video mapped sets, where the sets would be wiped on and moved around and video mapped behind the actors. And in these sets, I worked with the comic writer Alan Moore, and he's the guy who wrote Watchmen. He's the guy that wrote V for Vendetta and all sorts of stuff. And we had a good connection with each other, and we would do some visual magic together. He was into Kabbalistic magic, and I was into doing visual Kabbalistic typography magic. So we did a whole bunch of crazy visual typographical Kabbalistic magic together, and some of that is incorporated into the VR experience I did, where you have to do the sigil magic and take the acid inside that, and in that there is so much hidden mimetic Kabbalistic visual magic, but in a cool style, not in an occult goth style, but in cool new techno styles. And that's always been the thing I've wanted to do, was taking things like that into a new dimension, taking an old idea and making it a new idea and doing that sort of stuff. So I did a whole bunch of plays and video mapped sets, whereby I would be there every night and I would have to do the interactive video sets for the plays, and the actors would interact with the video sets being projected behind them. And I'd all set up in Resolume. and I'd be able to control actors talking to things in the walls, magical sigils appearing in flames, actors interacting with things. If they go to pick up a book, the book would fly away and fly around the set. They'd have to chase the book around the set to capture things. So I was always able to. I took theatre visuals to another direction. I made the theatre visuals interactive for the actors to do things with, and that involved working with the director and working it all out and doing it all. And I used Resolum to do that sort of stuff. So that was another interesting thing. But again, still doing the same crazy amoeba design look, the same influences I've always really had, but in another medium. And again, AI, it's another medium, and I'm doing the same, not the same look, but the same influences. So the influences I had 30 years ago are still here. As I said, I'm still doing CRT stuff and VHS stuff and doing that in AI. So using AI to generate VHS looking things and old looking things, and still doing that and incorporating things from a long time ago into new mediums, into new ways of doing things.
So it's very inspiring, man. So it's maybe time to ask if who is live now see possibility
I'm
to
surprised
ask.
I'm surprised no one's trolled you. I have my Polish friend who's probably listening just now, Neon Entries. He's a CRT guy as well. I'm surprised he's not trolled you, because he's definitely watching. He's going to annoy me. So I'm surprised he's not trolled you at the moment.
I have actually one friend in Berlin who is, I think he's Irish guy, and he use modular video scenes.
Ah.
Yeah, it's like also funny story.
Is it the thingy, the XYZ stuff?
Yeah, that's something like that.
Yeah. You need to be. If it's just using the source, it can look just shit. But if you're using video source and you're bringing in different sources to do it, it looks amazing. I've got a Vectrex. I do a lot of stuff with the Vectrex. Do you know the Vectrex, the vector monitor, the game system? The Vectrex.
Yeah.
So I've got a Pytrex, a Raspberry Pi that plugs into the Vectrex and turns the Vectrex into an audio-visual machine, and it's amazing. And I've got I'm going to be doing the XYZ modification to the Vectrex, which turns that into the proper vector display with the modular audio. I do music as well, so I've got some semi-modular stuff, and you can use the X, the Y, and the Z into the Vectrex. And the Z is brightness, and the X and the Y is left and right, and you can turn the Vectrex into one of the best vector displays you've ever seen. It's amazing. And there's a guy that I know that's turned the Vectrex into a projector, being able to use the XYZ to project vector images as well. I know there's a whole bunch of vector artists now as well, doing a whole bunch of interesting vector stuff.
One of my most funniest experiences, I mean, not my experience, but what I've seen, we were performing on Raster Noten party in Berghain.
Oh, yeah.
2016, I think. And it was Empty Set playing with us. And I seen their visual setup, and it was completely excited because they use a CRT monitor, the small one, and they put a VHS camera in front of it and captured the signal. And then I got, because I've seen a lot of music videos of them with like, that's amazing, no latency, I don't know, reaction on sound. And then I just fucking realized that that's come from the physical jumping of camera on subwoofer. Yeah, because it was literally reacting on the
and Empty Set, they were doing that really crazy dark industrial acoustic stuff at the time, weren't they? But it was all acoustic instruments doing electronic music at the time, so that it was all vibrations. That's why I put the cameras in front of the Vectrex and do stuff, but the Empty Set stuff live is amazing, absolutely brilliant. Yeah, and being able to do, the only way you could ever capture CRT properly was by a camera in front of it back in the day, and that was most stuff was that. But with the Empty Set stuff, with the just 100%, just the vibration of the camera, and it looks like the fastest frame rate you've ever seen, and that's how they did it. I know, it's fucking amazing, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, they were always my heroes.
They're fantastic, absolutely fantastic live. Love them live. They've done some amazing albums recently. Big fans of them.
Okay, I don't see so much people asking the question right now, so maybe I just can share the link to the course we start. The program is still in development, so I mean it will be updated very soon. I think we will use the next week the more detailed program. So if someone wants to look into program, it's possible right now, and we will announce it anyway in our all our informational channels. And yeah, logically, if you like the stream, you could subscribe to our channels. We will do other stream regularly, and if you have questions, please ask. Yeah, I see one guy asking something. Yeah, if you have question, fire. Okay, it's a question. Would you spend your time in college nowadays or go straight to an atelier and close yourself in the room with computers? What is your opinion on that?
Straight to the studio, close that fucking door, and do it yourself. Unless you know the college, unless you know the lecturers in the college, probably not now. Nowadays, with the stuff online and the availability of things online, you can teach yourself. You just need to have the skills to learn. You need to be able to learn, the skills to learn. Then no problem. Going to a college just now, it's very, unless you know the people, unless you know what their skill base is, most lecturers don't have the experience of being out in the real world. That's the problem. So if you know they are, if you know this, if the school was really good, like BIM in Berlin, if you know that the lecturers are good and they have the experience, they've been outside, they have the experience in their profession, yeah. But if you're going to I've taught at Brighton University, I've taught at many other universities, and most of them, the people don't have the experience at all. Most of the lecturers have never been out in the real world. They've just went straight into education to teach, and they've never been in the real world. I'm lucky. I've been in the real world forever, and I go into places I teach and things. I also did stuff at the Netherlands Film Academy, and in there, the people are real. They're real people who've been in the real world doing real stuff, and also coming into the educational world to help people. You have to do your research. If you want to go to college, do the research on the lecturers and what they're offering. And if you don't think they've got any experience in the real world, you're far better teaching yourself. If you know how to learn, if you have the discipline to learn, do it yourself.
I think I also have to add something. Actually, the reason I started all the project that How to Touch is just because I attended as a teacher to many different institutions in my life. And even if it was like commercial institution with 2-year learning path, I seen that people were missing the knowledge straight before the diploma work. So it was like, what? So on the end, what we do right now, I also understand that we have a mixed crowd who are attending our courses, and there are much of nerds, yeah, who can do really expensive and complicated technical stuff, but they're missing a bit of like conceptual understanding.
Yeah.
And I think most important right now for us to build a community and serve the community with a bunch of curated lessons by different experienced practicing artists, but with injection of academic approach, because yeah, we need a structure anyway, and to make that short, because we are living in very active world, so we don't have 5-6 years to teach anymore. Yeah, most important thing to solve your problems right now, because in 1 year the technology will change.
Absolutely.
So that we try to make a balanced way in between academical education and very practical oriented education, and we put effort now to make more personal support of the students, that people can achieve their targets much more effective and fast. Also, okay, we do it online, I hate online personally, but because everyone is based everywhere, it's also like we can see it not only like a problem, but also like a possibility, because we can make international collaboration between our students. And during the time I teach, and I teach since 2001 and started to teach online since 2009, then it was not yet a trend. I've seen a lot of people started to collaborate, and that is also basically most important thing you get if you go to the college is not the knowledge, it's more about like you have a community.
Yeah, the people. Your fellow students. Your fellow students. But I went to college. There was no computers. When I went to college, there was no Macintoshes, nothing like that. So there's no software. So I had to teach myself everything, every bit of software, how to use a computer, how to do everything. So I taught myself how to learn, and I've been around communities of VJs, communities of designers, communities of musicians. The community is super important, and that was the most important thing in universities and colleges. But now, since COVID kicked in, the learning and online learning is just natural now for people. It's not a big thing anymore. People used to be scared of it. Since COVID, it was more acceptable. And the only thing that doesn't give is give the community. Whereas a community like How to Touch is a bunch of people together, all learning the same thing and communicating with each other. I had the VJ forum community back in 25 years ago in the UK to do that. A whole community of people doing that. We were online sharing stuff, hating each other, threatening each other, but we were all together doing that. The community thing is super important. You can have the community thing without physically being there. You can still have that community thing. That can still exist. And I've seen that in COVID. It came out in COVID, people having that. Students I was teaching backing each other up, students having their own little private breakout rooms to talk about things and do stuff together, then coming back in to speak to me when I was teaching online. So the community does still exist on the online world, but community of fellow people like yourselves who do things is super important.
Also, a question about when we plan to start the course. So I think it might be adjusted the date related to the amount of people joining. So potentially we think to start it in around a month. And now there is an option to make prepayment just to reserve your seat, your spot, and then we can adjust the date. But I think August basically is a bit wrong time to start because everyone want to enjoy the sun.
Oh yeah.
So I think we will announce the proper date in several next days, because last time we decided to extend the program a bit. Just it was looking like a 4 weeks, and now it looks like a 6-7 weeks course. So we need to work on program a bit more detailed. So that's why we also decided to make a bit of air in front of the course.
Yeah, and do this talk whereby we introduce things and introduce what the plan is, introduce who I am, and to show people so that they get an understanding first.
So follow our channels. If you want to reserve a spot, you can do it right now already. And thank you for being with us. Thank you, Scott.
No problem. It was fun. I'd love to do it again. No problem. Anytime. I like nothing better than sitting talking about myself happily.
I think so. You can do it well, and it's all about the confidence, which you can afford only if you have a vision.
Yes.
And that's what all about.
Hell yeah. Well, thank you very much, everyone who's been here and everyone who's put up with this. Thank you very much.
So let's give 1 minute more to ask some more questions if someone has, and otherwise we will slowly go to the Sunday evening.
Slowly reverse out the building.
Yeah. Okay, from my point, we are done. Thank you, and
no problem. I'll stop recording and stop streaming.
Yep. Thank you, man. Bye-bye.